Good morning, everyone. So this is day 2 of trying to figure out how to explain that everything is spiritual. And I had a bit of a revelation, right? So we'll get a bit into the lesson or whatever the hell I'm going to say. And then I'll kind of talk about how it makes it personally within my life. Or actually, no, let me start with my life first. So the other day I had someone that I really cared about. We got in a bit of a fight, and they said these words that I've heard a lot. Um, and the words were, I don't need to understand, I don't owe you anything, and, I don't need you. Those were the 3 phrases that they said that really stuck out in the conversation. And I've heard those phrases a lot. Um, I don't need you, I don't owe you anything, and, yeah, I don't need you, I don't know. Those are the 2 that really stick out and that really hurt. Um, yeah, I don't have to understand. Those are the 3. I don't have to understand, I don't need you, and I don't owe you anything. How often do you guys hear that? I'm kind of interested. You can put down in the comments how often you guys hear that or phrases like that. Something I've been noticing, and I've been really trying to slow down my social media diet, because it's not that I'm critical of the general populace of the world, but I've realized in general the zeitgeist of the planet right now uh, generally doesn't have anything constructive to say. And what I mean by that is that most people, their advice or the things you'll hear are oftentimes obsessed with what is or what has been, and oftentimes aren't thinking about where we're going. So recently I had a major block removal. I'm going to call it, I've been doing meditating. I was meditating like crazy the last 3 days and had some pretty intense experiences. And one experience I had, I made a video about it my first day, which is why I started the whole everything is spiritual. But I made a video where I really felt like I hit rock bottom, and I posted it on my channel. And something that I had been feeling a lot lately is this sense of there was always a catch. Nothing could ever work out, and I wasn't allowed to complain, or I wasn't allowed to advance. Just this sense of this, I won't even call it stagnation, but almost just moving back and forth and taking the same step over and over and over again. And I just was wanting to get this feeling of being able to widen my stride and step through things. But I realized there was things I was holding on to. And when I was meditating, it conceptualized as this nail, this giant nail in my flesh, in my heart. But it wasn't just a nail. It had grown a root system, and it was almost like a barbed arrow, but the arrow barbs were larger than the arrow itself. It was just this giant root system of dense iron metallic material that had seared into my flesh, and it was just this giant growing metallic organism inside of me, and cutting parts of me off and creating all this damage. And it was just stuck inside of me, and it was stuck inside of my flesh. And at first, in the meditation, I was doing a couple techniques, and I tried to visualize pulling it out, and I was literally having shocks in my body when I tried to remove this nail. I had parts where I was imagining pulling the nail out or doing all this different stuff, and I was having actual visceral reactions, and I went into this intense spiral. I made a video about it, and it was one of the worst feelings I've ever experienced in my life. Just a feeling, it was so terrible. It was so terrible. Or I'm judging it as being so terrible. I think it was actually a really necessary feeling. It was a painful experience is what it was. And what it taught me was that everything is okay. With having said all that, I realized something, that in this day of self-love and this idea of the self, we oftentimes relegate the idea of self to the ego. And a lot of people think when they are like, oh, myself, myself, they're really saying ego. And that's so detached from the idea of love. Because if you think about what the function of the ego is, the function of the ego is to create this illusion of separation so you don't put yourself in danger, right? So that you don't expose yourself to circumstances that could harm you or threaten your survival. And so that's the function of the ego. A lot of people don't know that, but hey, newsflash, if you didn't know, the whole point of your ego is to keep you alive, right? However, one of the things I felt in this like new self-love era of, which is really just narcissism, and we all have narcissism to an extent. We need it because we all have an ego to keep us alive. But I realized what happens is when we over-identify with this ego, we begin to under-identify with the other parts of us that make us who we are. So for instance, like we have connections to other human beings because, we're the universe experiencing itself. And we have loving, empathetic interactions with people. And oftentimes, when those things aren't respected, there is a clash of ego, right? What happens is the ego comes, right? Because, like for instance, if I'm messing with a cat, and I'm kind of playing with it, the cat might bite me or scratch me. But we don't blame a cat for being annoyed at how we're treating it, right? We just understand that's the cat's nature. But then it was very interesting, and then, we lure it back with the food or whatever because we don't put this expectation on a cat or whatever. But then, if you think about a dog, right? A lot of dogs, you can mistreat them and they'll keep coming back. And then the consequences of that mistreatment will show up in the dog's health. It'll show up in how they're treated. But the dog will just be oblivious, right? And I think that's why they always say dog's band's best friend, but maybe it's because dogs are eternally forgiving. But I also think dogs also have lost a part of themselves. They have no ego. Dogs don't have any ego. They're completely for their master. And I realize that if you put yourself under a bad master that just abuses you or whatever, you just become this abused animal and you become a lesser version of yourself. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just see when this person said this, it was not the first person, and it's something I've heard a lot of people say over to me again and again and again. I don't need you. I don't have to understand. I don't owe you anything. And I was like, why is it that? And it's always been a very particular type of person in a very particular relational circumstance and in a very interesting thing. And I've been like, why is this happening? Right? And I've noticed every single time that happened, it's because I had gotten angry about something the person hadn't done. Something the person had done, right? And usually it was because I'd felt hurt and kind of mishandled and misused, and they were like, I don't owe you anything or whatever. And kind of in my own personal journey, the only thing I can take from that is that I can't spend my whole life running from people who treat me poorly. But at some point, at some level, everyone's going to make a mistake and treat you poorly. And I realized the big difference is there's going to be people who recognize that and seek to reconcile it. And there's other people where your function is to build up their ego. And I realized again and again, there had been so many relationships where I was coming into the relationship and I was building up the other person's ego while in a way sacrificing my own, much like a dog to its master, right? And I didn't even recognize I was doing this. I think it was just a habit that I'd built. But I realized the effect was that when suddenly I didn't like how they were treating me and they saw that I wasn't a dog, there was this sense of I was replaceable or I could be discarded. Now, in a lot of the times and circumstances, there were benefits from having me that they didn't recognize it. But I realized we live in a place, in a world where a lot of people won't recognize the benefits they get from you. And the reason I say that is because right now I'm staying in a building and I'm staying in a building and I pay rent for it or whatever. And I realized like I can give rent for it, but my paying the money did not make and build the house. Right? That's just how that's how I contribute value to what I am receiving. But the value I'm giving is not equivalent to the value I'm getting. I didn't have to build this building. The bed I sleep in, I didn't have to build that bed or make it. I just pay money for it. And then there's food I receive. I didn't have to make that food. Right? I just give money and then I receive all these things back. And I realize we owe the universe something. And I realize this idea of the ego that I just get everything I want because it's me, like that's one of the biggest lies that has been told in our modern era. And it's destroying us. And I realized that like, if I came here, I'm living here, if I started breaking the rules of this place, they're more than welcome to kick me out, right? But I realize we live in so many worlds that we have all these standards of exchange. And we've become so focused on consuming, just being consumers, that we don't recognize how to give any value anymore. So many people just know how to receive value and just take, but they don't know how to give. And then when someone says, hey, you need to pay for that, they're like, hey, what do you mean? And it's like, well, I'm paying, I'm giving equivalent value, but it's like, no, you're not, because you didn't have to build the house. Right? You didn't have to have the skills. You didn't have to know how to do anything. You just received the benefits, and all I ask in return is this small exchange of value. So it's not even reciprocation in a way, because you're not building another house. You're not adding with it. You're really just giving the bare necessities to maintain the blessing you are receiving. That's really all it is you're just like, when you think about it, if you get a tree and you have to water it and you have to take care of it and you receive fruit from it, you don't think, oh man, like, why do I have to give water? Like, it doesn't love me. It's like, no, you're receiving the blessing of that tree and everything you're giving is just to maintain it. And so relationships are kind of like that. And I've been trying to think it over in my head, like, how is it that you go into a relationship and it has to be give and receive, but it's not, a transaction. And I realize a transaction is this idea of equivalent value or everything being counted. Versus I've realized like an unconditional relationship is a system. It's a system of flow. And I realized like, it's not about just going to something and then just consuming it and taking it. Because if you keep taking, eventually there's going to be nothing left to take, right? It's just like when we go to the soil and we just keep growing food and we don't rotate our crops and we don't ever give anything back to the soil. Eventually, there's no nutrition in the soil. It's a cycle, and it's because the idea of self is not just this ego. You are not just your body. You are not just your mind. You are all these things in connection with everything else. And so this idea that like, I don't owe you anything, it's like saying to one part, it's like the right hand saying to the left hand, I don't owe you anything. It's like your legs saying to your brain, like, I don't have to understand you. It's like your heart telling your mind, like, I don't need you. That's what we do when we say that to each other. That's what we do. That's what we're saying. Because the reality is, it's like we all need each other. The only way to do that. And I realize like it's only that blindness, that ego, that sense of trying to protect yourself from the threat that is doing that. But when we live like in such privilege, such extravagance, and you haven't had or contributed to any level of that process or understand it at all, you begin to think like, I'm just here to receive and take and gorge myself. And I think where this was personal for me was I was in this relationship, and consistently I was with this person, and I mean, she's an amazing person. I just felt that there would be a lot of times when I wasn't considered, right? Where my experience, there was no empathy or understanding of what my experience would be like to accomplish something. So an example is like, there was a time when we needed to go meet up, and my car had broken. I had broken my car, and we wanted to go meet up at a restaurant. Now, the restaurant she wanted to go and meet up at was like 5 minutes away from her house by car. And she didn't want to drive, so she's like, hey, can you come meet me here? Now, the thing is, like, I lived about 25 minutes away from her by car, so 50 minutes both ways, right? Almost an hour to go both ways. But then if I wanted to take public transit, it would take me like about 2 hours to get there, right? And then usually I was the one paying for meals and things like that, and like she didn't have any money at the time. So I was like thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm probably gonna have to pay for this meal. So at the time I was thinking like, wait, you want me to go 2.5 hours because you don't want to drive by bus. You want me to go there, pay for the meal. And the last few times when we had met up, like we'd had to cancel a few of our dates and things like that because she was just like not really showing up properly. And I appreciate that she even heard it out so far, because some people will just ghost and quit. But I'm just realizing like that's how low the standard has gotten. Right? That's how low the standard of how we treat other people has gotten in this day and age. Where like if someone doesn't instantly ghost you right away, like that's supposed to be good. And it's like, it's really made me kind of want to pull back and just be like, what am I doing here? And the thing is, I'm not the only one doing it. I'm not the only one thinking that way. But I've realized so much of the thinking, especially being disseminated by social media, is just this sort of like narcissistic self-love, you don't need anybody bullshit jargon. And it really is that. And I think, especially because when I was younger, I remember believing that. I remember thinking, yeah, I can do anything. I don't need anybody else. And then you get older and you realize how big of a freaking lie that is. And then there's people who push it and perpetuate it because we're just building each other's egos. But that's all we're doing. We're just stroking each other's egos, being like, oh, you're so big, you're so bad, you don't need anyone, you don't have anything. And we're just constantly building our egos. And that's what everybody does, is just build the ego. And they think like, the reason I have relationships is to build my ego. And so if I don't look at myself and think I'm a good person or whatever, this person or this relationship isn't good for me because it's not making me feel better about myself. When it's like, it was never a relationship's job to make you feel better about yourself. Relationships, if they're the best relationships, will reflect to you who you are. And then from that, you can then decide what you're going to do with it. The best relationships in myself, every time I've been selfish or ever haven't listened or I've been rude, I've been inconsiderate, the best relationships, the person told me, hey, I don't like what you're doing here. That was inconsiderate. That was rude. And they got on me. And then I became a better version of myself. I became to release my ego and to step into the greater, higher version of myself. Those are the best relationships because they're really about you. It's really about love because, like that cat, it will come back. It will still scratch you if you disrespect it, though. But the thing is, if you disrespect it enough times, it'll leave. But the thing is, why is every relationship we have either about appeasing or falling into someone's minor self-concept of their ego, or you have to abandon that person? That's literally like this. It's become this binary choice of accept me for as I am or take me or leave me. It's like, whatever happened to just being better? Whatever happened to just being like building something and not just extracting it? And then we wonder why there's such a disparity between those who have power and money and capacity and those who don't. When it's like, the people who got better, like, there's no amount of ego stroking that will make you better at the piano. The only way to get better at the piano is you have to practice. And if you want someone who's really going to help you at the piano, them telling you you're playing it right when you are in fact playing it wrong is not going to make you a better piano player. It's actually going to make you worse. Yet that seems to be how so many people want their personal development and their relationships to be like. The hardest thing this year about finding self-respect was realizing how many people I had to let go. Because when you're not telling them how awesome they are, constantly building their ego, and then you're just like, hey man, I don't appreciate when you talk to me like that. Hey, that doesn't make me feel good. Rather than dealing with it or trying to have a conversation with it, they'll just leave or be rude or like, I don't have time for this or whatever. And I'm just more being okay with that now. Just being okay with that. And I don't know, I'm doing this rant. There's a part of me that feels like no one's going to give a shit or watch it. And I realize I've been keeping myself from sharing myself with the world because there's this part of me that has always been worried about making other people feel like they're less. A common thing I've felt is a lot of people will say like, I don't feel like I'm good enough when I'm around you, Oni. And then when I ask specifically, well, what is it I'm doing? What is it I'm saying? It's like there's nothing I can say. But it's like when you don't have that sense of self-concept, that is not the fault of people who do. It is not manipulative for me. It is not manipulative for me to know what I want and to go and try and get it. That is not manipulative. It is not rude. It is not inconsiderate. Especially if you can't give what I'm looking for. It's not bad. Why would I do that? Why would I put that pressure on you? But then people will feel like, well, I feel like I'm not good enough. Well, maybe you're not. But it doesn't mean you're always going to be that way. You can grow. We can all just grow and learn. And if you want to and you're willing to grow and learn, you can do it. Now, love is people accepting you for who you are. Right? Love does not demand you be better. The world does. I can love you, like I can love myself all I want, but if I don't pay my rent here, they have every reason to kick me out. All the love in the world won't change that. But if I love myself enough, I'll get them what they need. Or I can build my own damn house. But ultimately, if I'm going to create the results I want in my life, if you're going to create the results you want in your life, you have to step up and learn the capacities, the knowledge, the abilities to do that. And it is not the fault of those who have the knowledge, the responsibility, and the capacity to do so to make up for your lack. They are not. Amazon is not a bully because they are a bigger, stronger machine than everybody else. They are not a bully. They're just more powerful, right? Someone is not more manipulative or, evil because they're able to do something that you are not. That is not. Stop placing malicious intent on those who have capacity. And I've realized I've spent so much time not wanting to be capable or showing myself as being capable because I don't want other people to dislike me or think that I'm trying to show off or be manipulative. But now I'm just starting to realize holding myself back has only ever hurt me. It has never helped me. All those people I did it for, the minute I started doing anything for myself or started getting better, they left. They were nowhere to be seen. Nada. There was no love there. And yeah, people who love you are going to want you to do better. And people will say, oh, I want you to do better. I want all this stuff. So many people are so full of shit. And you don't have to go far to find that. If you go on social media, there's all these long rants about people. And I'm like, you know what? 99% of these people, I would not want any part of their lives. I would never switch places with them. And I started realizing it. I was like, if I wouldn't switch places with someone, I really don't give a rat's ass what you have to say. I really don't give a shit what you have to say. Doesn't mean I don't love you. Doesn't mean I don't care about you. Just means your opinion does not hold a lot of water in my eyes. And I realize there's a lot of people who I love very dearly, I feel that way about. Where it's like, I would not trade places with you. I do not like the person you are more than the person I am. I do not think you, like, there are few people I admire and respect to the point of level where I'm like, oh, there's parts of me I kind of wish I could be more like them. There's like 5 people in my life there's like 5 people in my life that I can say that, and only 2 of them are actively in it. Only 2 people are actively in my life where I'm like, oh yeah, like, you say something, and I would like take it seriously and think about it. The other people, like, literally, it's like, I love you, but you're not saying anything that I feel like is more capable of living me or being me better than I am being myself. And some people might be like, well, Oni, that's arrogant, that's cocky, you're so self-centered. And I'm like, I believe I'm one of the least self-centered people I know. I spend so much time focusing and giving to other people. And I realized in all that time, I've not given to myself. And I'm constantly in situations where I'm waiting for this other people to show up for me, but I haven't shown up for myself that way. But I'm not talking about the self that is my ego. That's a part of it. And I've realized I've dissociated too much from that. But I've realized also, like, I deserve and need to show up for myself because I want to support and help the people in my life. And I've realized, like, in a way, I'm more capable of supporting and helping this person than they are. And I realized, but the only way I can do that is I need to take care of myself. I have to put on my mask first so I can put on all these other motherfuckers' masks. And I really feel that way. I really legitimately feel that way. Because I talk to them and I listen to people and I'm like, you're never going to, like, it's like, you're not going to figure this out. And some people will be like, well, everybody learns shit in their own time. No, guys. The reason the world is the way it is because there's lots of people who don't ever figure shit out. That's why when people do, they succeed so wildly. They do so well. Because so many people don't figure it out. So many people don't take the time or do the work. And I realized I'm willing to do the work. I have been willing to do the work for a long, long time. And I'm tired of always having a catch-22 or having to explain myself. Or, frankly, being told bullshit like that. I don't need you. I don't have to understand. Right? I don't owe you anything. This was never about owing anybody anything. That's never what it was about that. This is not about paying back a debt. It's that the nature of what we are doing, the nature of life, is that it is a system. You have to give and receive. You cannot sit there in life, do nothing, and expect anything from it outside of the grace of God. If you believe that is just you. Now, if you see God as yourself, then great, you figured it out. Sure, you figured that out. But if you think your tiny little ego that is reacting to every single discomfort in your life is the producer of everything you see around you, think again. Like other people, other parts of nature, animals, the weather, everything is an extension of us, who we are. And when we ignore that and act as though it's separate from us, you are in fact creating a barrier, an obstacle to the reality of your situation. Right? Reality is that we are all interconnected. And to act as though this one aspect of yourself does not exist is just retarded. And I'm so sick and tired of living in a world or talking with and humoring people who think that way. And there are so many people in my life who are like that. And I'm realizing, like, I don't want to have to talk to these people anymore. I don't want to think like that anymore. I don't want to constantly feel like I have to explain why, as a human being, I want a community. Why, as a human being, I need to feel loved or taken care of or be considered. Right? I spend so much time bending over for other people. I don't understand why I can't just be considered. I don't understand why it is so much of an ask to be like, hey, maybe don't let me make 2 hours. Recognize that not everything's always 50-50. Sometimes it's going to sway back and forth. Recognize that you can't hold me accountable, but I'm also going to hold you accountable. That we can talk to each other and we can be honest with each other and not have to constantly explain or make someone feel like they are perfect. Right? You are already perfect. The fact I don't have to constantly tell you that. If the fact I have to tell you that because you look at making this mistake or not understanding, if you look at that as imperfection, that is the problem. You need to stop looking at it as anything within your human experience that does not perfectly line up with your will as a lack of perfection. Right? You are living your life as you are supposed to. Right? Hopefully. But every time you begin to think I'm not, that's what creates that. It's the thinking that you're not that makes it not that way. When you just accept it, that, hey, you know what? This is the human experience right now. I need to move forward, and I deserve love, care, and kindness, but I also need to be held accountable. And the reality is I don't have this building. My ass is getting rained on. There's no mental jujitsu around that. You have to hold yourself accountable to the universe. The universe, as much as it loves you, will not let you dick around. If I walk into the ocean without a paddle and a boat and without any food and I expect to survive just because I've decided it's going to be that way, ignoring the laws of the ocean's going to show me real quick how it works. Right? You cannot expect to just abuse people and get away with it and then think, oh, it's an abusive. Like the other day someone told me like they were in an abusive relationship. I don't want to hear that anymore. If someone tells me like, oh, I was in an abusive relationship, I get you're in an abusive relationship, but you realize half of any relationship is you. You are literally half of every single relationship you've ever been in. So if you keep characterizing all your relationships as abusive, you are half of that. That is half of you. And you're like, well, I was just, yeah, you can play the victim all you want. Literally, I would rather hang out with someone who's a complete asshole and is a bully than a victim. I'd rather be like, oh, this guy pushes people around. I don't want to hang out with either, if I'm being honest. I don't want to hang out with either. But if I had to pick the guy who was a bully or the guy who's a victim, I can teach that bully to soften up. But I am exhausted, done, and tired of teaching the victim to stand up for themselves and stop being a freaking pushover. I'm done with that. I'm done with that narrative. Right? So just because someone is being assertive, because the thing is we live in a world where there are natural elements. Right? The ocean doesn't have to apologize for being the ocean. Right? A lion doesn't have to apologize for being a lion. And I'm not going to apologize for having and wanting consideration. I'm not going to apologize for wanting to be thought of and cared for. Right? Now, and that's it. And I'm not manipulative. I'm not rude. I'm not thoughtless because I say these things. And some people will have all these words and these judgments because I am a thoughtful person. I am caring. Right? And I'm open. Literally, if anyone's got a problem with me, you can literally come talk to me. You are not blocked. There's like 2 people who are blocked, and they know why. Because they did shit. They did shit. Right? But if you want to come and resolve shit with me, I've never had someone who's wanted to resolve something and being like, no, you can't resolve things with me. I'm just going to be petty. I'm not like that. The only time is one particular guy literally betrayed me and was like, oh, we want to be friends, but then wouldn't apologize. I'm like, okay, well, you don't seem to accept that you betrayed me, and that's why I don't want to talk to you. So if you can't accept that you don't need to betray me, he literally said this ridiculous line, your boundaries are crossing over mine. Then I'm like, how does my having boundaries cross over your boundaries? I'm literally not talking to you. See, this is the ridiculous shit we deal with in this day and age. And I realize this is why people say the stupid shit they say. Because we have so many other crazy people out there who are just so self-absorbed, who are all just consuming each other. But it's like, guys, eventually the ecosystem has to balance itself out. And like, I'm so glad I got myself out of this environment. And I'm just making this video. I don't know if anyone's going to watch it or if anybody cares. Honestly, I feel like outside of like invisible light beings in my head and like God, I don't have anybody in my life. I really don't. I feel like everybody in my life is either needs something from me or like, yeah, needs something from me or like hates me, right? Like, I have one person in my life who was like, okay, that person's a constant. One. And I feel grateful. I'm absolutely grateful. It's my best friend. Actually, there's two. What I said, not one, there's two. There's two, right? They know who they are, right? One was a roommate, one is my best friend, right? They know who they are. Those are the two people in my life, absolute constants. Everything else has just been a bunch of transactional chaos. And I'm like, done. There's a part of me that just wants to get up, clear the books, and then just like, and it doesn't mean that if you've been in my life, you're wrong. I'm just saying you're probably not in my life now, because I've also kind of gone on my own hermiting journey. So this is not to castigate or push anybody away. But I mean, somebody could reach out, you know? Somebody could reach out. It's not like I'm getting my phone blown up or a bunch of people being like, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. But I'm meeting good new people or whatever. But honestly, I'm at this point where I'm grateful for the people I have. And I've met some good people who I hope to like begin fostering new good relationships with. But the reality is, it's like, I just want to be the best version of myself that I can. I want to be someone who contributes and who gives and who's part of the ecosystem, not just someone who sits and takes. So if you're interested in doing that, please let me know. I would love to hang out, and then we could just get to know each other and just think about contribution. But like, I'm done being around people who just take. Because the thing is, I'm also in this place where like I need a lot, but I recognize I want to live a life of giving value and sharing. And I realize I can't keep holding myself back or being scared what people who really don't give a shit about me think. So there's that. And yeah, I feel like I'm talking to the ether and like nobody cares, but a part of me is just like, I'm okay with that now. I'm okay with that now. And at this point, like this last year, I was like vacillating back and forth. And one thing I told myself is I'm not going back anymore. And I don't know what that looks like, but I'm gonna start making more videos and just doing stuff. And I don't care if I'm freaking sleeping on the side of the road. As long as I have a phone in my hand and a fucking Wi-Fi connection, I'm gonna put something out there. Because I am done. I am so done not living how I want to live, or holding myself back, waiting for something. I am done. I told myself that I needed time, and I do, I need time, but the time to start for needing that time is now. So I'm engaged. So there you go. All right, I'm just gonna leave that go, and I'm gonna share it, and I don't care.